It's a pleasure to welcome you on stage, Rosemary Luckin, everyone.
Boogie.
You just got the
Sunshine.
yeah.
Moonlight. Good times.
Bit of a squeak there. Oh, that's better. You can hear me. Yes, I'd like to talk to you this morning about artificial intelligence and think about it in the education context. Already this morning I've used AI. I've used it in navigation. I've used it in searching. Artificial intelligence is part of our lives, and there are definitely implications for those of us involved in education. So I'm going to talk about the implications for educators, and I'll do a little side trip to tell you a little bit more about Educate, because I think that's relevant to how we make AI appropriate for education. But really, to start off with, what do we mean by artificial intelligence? There are lots of different definitions, but basically what we're talking about is machines that can behave in ways that we would think were intelligent if we were watching a human behaving in that way. We have our voice-activated interfaces on our phones, our Siris, our Alexas. All of these are using artificial intelligence techniques to analyze, to process the language that we're speaking, to understand it, and to be able to reply. But there's a real difference between the artificial intelligence that's making the headlines now and the artificial intelligence that we had several years ago. And it's a very important difference, because it's the difference that makes the impact of artificial intelligence so much greater than in previous years. This is a picture of a chess game, and it's a picture that captures one of the times in which an IBM computer called Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov, who was then world chess champion at chess. And this was a phenomenal feat. But this was a machine that was basically a whole lot of rules. It was using artificial intelligence that could run quickly to process lots and lots of different rules to decide what moves the chess playing computer would make. That chess playing computer couldn't improve because it was the set of rules that the programmers had instantiated in the program. It couldn't learn any more about chess. It could play 100,000 times. It wouldn't improve because it would always be bound by this rule base. And then we had this. And this is AlphaGo. And I love this picture because you can see Lee Sedol, the world champion, with his head in his hands, capturing the moment when perhaps he realized that AlphaGo, a computer produced by Google DeepMind, was going to beat him at the game of Go. So two game-playing AIs, but this one can learn. The more times that AlphaGo plays Go, the better it gets. Because it's not based on a set of rules, it's based on artificial intelligence techniques called deep learning. And that is learning from experience, just as we, as children and adults, learn from experience. So deep learning algorithms learn from experience. And that experience is captured in the data that they're fed, and in this instance, the games that are played. But these are really significant moments. And it's really this combination of gaining advanced AI techniques like deep learning, having the computer power and memory to be able to process the masses of data that you need for those deep learning algorithms to work effectively. And so it's really a perfect storm of those things: the computing power and memory, the data, and the deep learning algorithms that has got us to a place where we have very smart artificial intelligence that can learn, that can go on improving. And that is a game changer. Now, as you'll see as I go through this talk, AI is not good at everything. It's good at a very specific set of things. But what it is good at, it's very good at. Provided it's well designed, and provided the data that is used to help that learning algorithm learn is representative, is appropriate. So it has to be well designed. But where does this leave us as educators? Well, I think there are three main implications that artificial intelligence, machines that can learn, bring for us educators. There's what we need to do or can do using artificial intelligence to tackle some of the big educational challenges that we face in the world. Teacher shortages. I don't mean replacing teachers with AI, but we could certainly use artificial intelligence to augment the capacity of teachers and to help teachers teach many, many students at distance effectively with augmented artificial intelligence. The second thing is helping people to understand about artificial intelligence. It is changing our lives, it's not going to go away, and we need a population who understand not how to code artificial intelligence, and that's not the point. What AI is, what machine learning is, why data is important, what AI can do, what it can't do. Because everybody's likely to come up against it in their jobs, and so we need people to have a basic understanding. And then the third one, the grey circle, which is the hardest of all, is thinking about how we need to change our education systems, because we now have these machines that can learn. We know we can build AI systems that can pass tests and exams, and they'll just get better and better and better. So we need to really think, is this what we want our students to be doing? Maybe we need to have a little bit of a rethink. So they're the three categories, and I'll talk about each of them in turn. But they're not discrete, they are interconnected. Because if we learn to use artificial intelligence effectively, we'll start to understand more about it. And as we understand more about it, we'll see why we might need to change the way that we teach in order to equip people to prosper as we move through the 21st century. But if we start off with this one, we can think about what about AI is useful in teaching. I find at the moment I often get invited to talk to people who are thinking, actually often quite anxiously, oh, what's this? I need to get some AI. Everybody's talking about AI. You know, we need some AI. And it's like, well, why do you need some AI? What do you need that AI to do? What's the problem that you want that AI to solve for you? I think we've got to be very careful. It's not something that you just think, oh, right, everybody else is doing some AI, let's get some AI. It's actually, well, what's it going to do for you? So let's look at a few of the kinds of things that we can use AI for. So this is a very nice piece of artificial intelligence software, and these examples are things that are available now, and sort of examples of the sorts of things that are out there. Both of these pieces of software are produced by a company in the States called Alelo, and they provide very good quality, individualized tutoring in this instance Danish, and in this instance workplace skills. And it's nice, you interact with an on-screen character. In some of their applications you can speak, so it's voice activated. As you learn, you can interact with the character on the screen, who will help you improve your language learning in that instance. And these are good. And we know that systems like this, when they're well designed, are as effective as a human teacher teaching a group. We have not got an AI that's as good at tutoring as a one-to-one human-to-human, but very few learners get that special experience. So if we can build systems that are pretty good, that can be very helpful for teachers for doing some of the groundwork. And then a different kind of category of ways in which artificial intelligence can be used are recommender systems. You know, it's not the system's going to teach you, but if you're a teacher, it might help you find from thousands and thousands of resources, the resources that are most appropriate for you, or if you're a learner, it might help you find the resources that are going to help you learn in the most effective way. And it's not just for adults. This is a really nice, it's one of the companies who we've worked with on the Educate program, company. This is for babies, so that little cloud device sits in a young child room and captures the noises, captures the interactions that the parents have, captures whatever language the child is trying to form as they learn. And then it analyzes that and provides feedback for parents to try and help them enhance their child's development. And it's not just using AI to help us learn particular subjects. This is another use of artificial intelligence by a company called My Cognition, and this one's about cognitive fitness. The application assesses your executive functioning, your memory, your speed of processing, your attention. And then you play a game called Aquasnap that gradually adapts to try and help you improve that those elements of your cognitive fitness. So that's the kind of AI we have now. And it's useful. It's very useful. But we're really only just scratching the surface of what artificial intelligence is capable of. Because as I said at that start when I put up that slide about the perfect storm, the real reason that AI is making such a difference to our lives at the moment is because we have this combination of lots of data and these algorithms that can learn from data, along with the technology and the processing power that we need. So a couple of years ago, I think it was The Economist coined the phrase, data is the new oil. And it's certainly true that, like oil, data is making a few companies extremely wealthy. Also, just like oil, data is crude. And the power and the value is in the way that data is processed. And so, as educators, we need to think about that very carefully. We can capture data throughout our students' lives. Put aside the ethics for a moment, I will come back to ethics. As they move, as they look, as they speak, as they interact, as they sleep, as they eat, it's perfectly possible to capture data through their devices, through cameras. We can capture enormous amounts of information about learners. And one of the aspects of advancement in science that is perhaps less talked about than the advancements in artificial intelligence is the advancements that have happened in parallel in the learning sciences. So psychology, neuroscience, sociology, education. We now understand how humans learn a great deal more than we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So at the same time as we've been building these smart deep learning algorithms, we've also been understanding more about how humans learn. So the real power for education comes from making sure that the data that we collect as people interact in the world is analyzed by algorithms that are designed with an understanding of what we now know about how humans learn. That's what's important. Because if we get that bit right, then we have the potential to create something quite amazing. We have the potential to create an intelligence infrastructure that can underpin all of the interactions that we have as we go about our learning in the world. Whether that's an interaction between people, because as a person, as a teacher, I understand more about that learner because of the data and the AI analysis of that data. I've been able to understand more about where that learner is struggling, and that means my human interaction with them can be more targeted. Or whether that intelligence infrastructure is feeding interactions in the workplace, coming through our phones, intelligent augmented and virtual reality. If you think about it, a lot of what we read about in the news at the moment with our big tech companies, we already have an intelligence infrastructure. It's just not being used for educational purposes. It tends to be used to try and persuade people to buy things, to try and move people in particular directions. So we know it can be done. If we got it right, if we had educators in the conversation, and if we had learning scientists helping us design the algorithms, we could do something really amazing for education. And yes, there are huge ethical implications, which I'll come to later. And it's not just for able-bodied. Intelligent exoskeletons, intelligence in glasses to help blind people see, but also to help them learn about the world. There's lots of possibilities if we get this right. So that's a quick summary of where we are now with AI, but also trying to give you a kind of insight into where we might go with artificial intelligence through that intelligence infrastructure. But there are some big challenges that need to be overcome here. Most of the people designing AI don't understand anything about teaching and learning. Most educators don't understand much about AI. Why would they? So we really need to broker cross-stakeholder partnerships to work together to design the right kind of AI for education. And one way of doing that is through programs like our Educate program at UCL. It's a program for entrepreneurs, for startups and small businesses. In the last 3 years, we've worked with just over 250 different companies, and it's founded on this notion of the golden triangle. And the golden triangle has 3 points, as all triangles do, and the 3 points are represented by 3 different communities. The people who use technology, teachers, learners, the people who make technology, and researchers who understand how you know whether that technology is actually working when it comes to learning and teaching. And it's connected, and it's connecting those 3 communities that's important, and it's particularly important when it comes to artificial intelligence. And we call it the golden triangle because the gold is the evidence, because it's all about generating evidence so that teachers can understand more about whether the technology they're using is working. It's about collecting evidence that can be used to design good AI. It's all about brokering those relationships to create the kind of collaborations that will improve technology, particularly AI, as we move forward. So we have a program for entrepreneurs, and that's the vision that we have for that program, trying to get them to understand, trying to get them to develop what we call a research mindset, right from the word go. So as these companies grow, it's part of their DNA to be constantly generating evidence to understand whether their product or service really is delivering to teachers and learners, as we would hope. And we take them through quite an intense program. They do research training. They have to develop a theory of change for their product or service. They have to generate a logic model with steps, at each of which step they could collect evidence to understand whether they're moving in the right direction. We also recognize when they've achieved. So we have our Edwards, which we celebrate every 6 months for the companies that have demonstrated that they've not just come on the program, they've really engaged with it, and they are understanding about how you apply a research mindset, and they're applying it into their business. But of course, it's not just the entrepreneurs that we need to develop support for. We also need to support educators like yourselves. We need to help educators be able to integrate the constantly changing set of technologies that come their way. And again, this is particularly important when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we've piloted and we're now developing this program into a digital platform for educators. And it's a very similar kind of approach to the approach that we take with the entrepreneurs, in that we help the teachers to generate evidence about whether the way that they're using technologies is supporting their practice, is supporting learning. But we actually start with the senior management team in a school, and we look at the key challenges that individual institution is facing. We identify 2 or 3 key challenges, and then we ask the senior team to nominate some teachers to work with us. And we look at how those challenges are translated into each of those teachers' classrooms. And at this point, we haven't said anything about technology or AI. Then we do something very practical. We do an audit of that institution to see what technology already exists. And we do an audit of the human resource that understands how that technology works. Because what we see time and time again is that we get an educator who's very enthusiastic, introduces a particular technology into a school. They then leave, but the knowledge about how to really use that technology doesn't stay with them. So with the schools that we've worked with, as we've done this audit, we found actually money saving for them, because there's pieces of technology, software licenses that they're paying for and nobody's actually using. And there are things that people don't really understand how to use. You could use this approach for selecting new technologies, but for most schools it's a case of trying to use what they have more effectively. And then we help teachers to identify technologies that they can use in their classroom to tackle the particular challenges that they face. And we show them how to develop the theory of change, the logic model, in a very light touch way, so that they can generate evidence about whether that use of technology is really working. And they can then share that with their colleagues. And that means that we're trying to give both the entrepreneurs and the educators this research and evidence mindset in a very practical way. Now, we've been delivering the program for entrepreneurs, mainly in a face-to-face format, but we have now, and it launched last week, a digital platform that has all the resources for entrepreneurs that we've used on the program. It won't have the human support that we provide, but it does have the resources. And now we're building the software platform for the educator program so that it can be spread at scale. Admittedly, it's all English language at the moment, but it's early days. But it has really been about trying to join that triangle up and get that research mindset thinking in both teachers and entrepreneurs, and importantly, to broker the kind of relationships that we need in order to design the best AI for education. So back to AI more specifically. Now, I think you can see that that golden triangle fits quite neatly in the middle of those three challenges that we face in education. If we can get educators working with AI designers to help AI designers understand more about teaching and learning, if we can get researchers in there who understand about the learning sciences, we will get better AI. We'll also help the teachers understand more about AI, and we'll help the AI developers understand more about teaching and learning. So it's a win-win, actually. But back to those implications. So I've looked at how AI can be used. I've tried to paint a picture of the future. I've looked at the kind of stakeholder relationships that we need to broker. But what about understanding about AI? I said at the start that it was important for everybody to understand enough to be able to benefit from their use of AI. And I think it's true that everybody does need to know something. They need to understand what AI is, what it does, what it can do, what it can't do, what's data, how does it matter to machine learning algorithms, what's the difference between machine learning and other forms of AI. I think everybody does need to understand that, not least because we need people to be able to use AI safely. But we also need a small amount of the population to understand AI in a great deal more detail in order to build the next generation of AI systems. And we also need some people to understand AI in great depth in order to develop the ethical frameworks that will help ensure that the AI that we have, particularly in education, is ethically grounded. Now, I think education is the most important thing in the world. I think it underpins everything else. It's the one thing we want people to interact with throughout their lives. So it has to be the most important application when it comes to artificial intelligence. And we were concerned that nobody was really holding this concern about artificial intelligence, ethics, regulations. So two of my colleagues, Sir Anthony Selden and Priya Lakhani, formed the Institute for Ethical Artificial Intelligence in Education at the end of 2018. And we are working to produce a framework for regulators to try and ensure that the kind of artificial intelligence that's used for teaching and learning is ethically sound. And it's complicated. If you just think, I am a child who struggles to use a keyboard, I can use a voice-activated interface to interact with a program. The AI analyzes what I say. But that AI is also collecting lots of information, lots of background information that might actually identify where I am, who I am, other factors. We have to be very, very careful. For every potential benefit that AI brings, there's a potential detriment, and we need to make sure we get the benefit and we reduce any chance of detriment. But I have to say, regulation will never be perfect, which is why I bang on a lot about people understanding enough about AI so that they don't always rely on the regulation being there, so that they're careful when they're using it. It's very important. And out of that third grey piece that I said was the hardest, this is about how we need to rethink how we teach, how we learn, how we train people. And really, this is very much a conversation around what's called the fourth industrial revolution. the idea that actually artificial intelligence, automation is changing the workplace and we therefore need to rethink. And I think that's true. But I worry slightly about the kinds of conversations that are going on in this space. There are a lot of reports. This is an example from one of those reports. Will robots really steal our jobs? And these reports tend to produce lots of graphs like this. They kind of identify the areas in the economy where most jobs will be at risk from automation. And you can see in this one that education's right at the bottom. And I think that's absolutely right. I don't think educators are at risk of automation, as long as we get it right. I do think there's a risk we might get it wrong, and that people influenced too much by the bottom line might be persuaded by some of our very persuasive tech companies that an AI can do what a teacher can, but absolutely it can't. So I think you're safe, but I do think education will change because of AI. As I said earlier, if we have these machines that could ace any test and exam, we need to kind of rethink some of what we regard as success in education. And another interesting statistics, most of the reports don't agree on the number of jobs, and they don't agree on lots of things, but there are things they do agree on. And one is that people with a better education will be better placed as the world of work changes. We'd kind of assume that would be the case, but there's lots of evidence that supports that. But I think the problem with these reports is that they're trying to predict the future in a very precise way. They're trying to predict which jobs, how many jobs, and I just don't think that's the right question. I think the situation we're in at the moment is a bit like driving a car on a very, very foggy road that you've never driven along before. We don't know. We're lousy at predicting the future. We actually really don't know, because it's not just a question of what the technology is capable of. It's a question of how people adopt that technology. It's not as simple. The technology is developing this way. In 5 years, it will be able to do X, therefore Y. It doesn't work that way. We cannot predict exactly what will happen, and we can't predict the kinds of events that happen in the world that can have a big impact on what happens with technology. So rather than these reports that try and do this, which I think are really like trying to give us a roadmap, if I'm driving along a road I've never driven along before, a very foggy road, having a road map's not really very helpful because I can't see what's represented on the road map. What is helpful is knowing that I've got a very reliable car, that I've got good brakes, my steering's not wonky, I'm awake, I haven't been drinking, I'm a good driver, I've got lights, I can hear. Those are the kinds of things that matter. And so really what I think we need is to find out, well, what's the equivalent of that good car with the sound driver as we progress through the 21st century in terms of what we need to equip our learners to be able to do. And at this point, I want to go back to where I started with that chess-playing computer. When that chess-playing computer beat Garry Kasparov, I was a humble student doing my PhD in artificial intelligence and cognitive science. And I remember working in an AI department, everybody was so thrilled. We've built a machine that can play chess. Chess is played by intelligent people. We are cracking intelligence. It was very, very, very positive. And then within a year, there was the realization that actually vision, that we rather take for granted, is way harder than playing chess. And even now, our artificially intelligent visual systems still not really quite as good as a good human seer. So we kind of take for granted some of the aspects of our human intelligence that are particularly valuable and that are much harder to automate. So I think that's really where we need to focus. I think we need to think about interdisciplinarity, not just learning a particular discipline, but learning about the different disciplines and how they connect. I think we need to help people understand what knowledge is, where it comes from, what's good evidence that can justify why I should believe something to be true or not. Questioning. I think we need people to develop good social skills, good metacognitive skills. I think we need them to be emotionally intelligent, but perhaps more than just emotionally intelligent, I think we need them to be meta-emotionally intelligent. And I think we need them to understand their context and where they sit in that context. Now, this is important. As humans, we're very, very good at moving into different locations, interacting with different people. We're not phased. I've never been in this hall to give a talk. I have sat in the audience in this hall, but I've not been on this stage before. But I kind of know how it works. And if I did something bizarre, like leaping off the stage and jumping on the table, it would be a bit of a surprise, wouldn't it? You know, I can kind of move very seamlessly between different contexts. And that contextual intelligence is really important, and it's incredibly difficult for AI. So I think we need this interdisciplinary academic intelligence, and we certainly need social intelligence for the collaborative problem solving that we're going to need to do in the world. But then I think there are these meta aspects of our intelligence. These meta aspects of our intelligence are the aspects that help us to understand ourselves, to understand what we know, what we don't know, to be able to set goals, to understand how we're feeling and how that's impacting on the way we're learning and behaving, to understand how other people are feeling, and to be able to regulate. That self-understanding is the most important thing. And the golden nugget at the bottom is this accurate perceived self-efficacy. If we understand ourselves well, if we're able to set our goals, to be motivated to achieve them, to understand how we achieve them, then we're good at learning and we can advance ourselves in the world. And that's what's important, and that's not something that AI can do. Fundamentally, I don't believe AI will ever be able to do all of this, but there are people who would disagree with me on that. AI is really good at disciplinary intelligence, and it's very, very good at crunching lots and lots of information and processing that information and learning from it, recognizing patterns in it. AI is really good at that, and it's very useful. But this is way smarter than AI. And the other thing I think we need to remember is this hasn't finished evolving. We're not done and dusted. Our intelligence is still evolving. And I think what AI should be telling us is that we need to keep that intelligence evolving. We need to keep being smarter. And we need to use our artificial intelligence to help us be smarter, rather than using our artificial intelligence to offload some of the very valuable thinking that we need to do, because it's easier if we let the AI do it. We need to be very, very careful how we allocate tasks to artificial intelligence and what we keep control of as humans. And to give you an example of that, I said earlier that if we get it right and we design algorithms in a way that's informed by learning science, informed by what we've learnt about how humans learn, we can really start to understand what's happening as someone's learning. But would we then want to let the artificial intelligence make a decision about that learner? Would we want to let that artificial intelligence make a decision about that learner's future? Would we want to use that artificial intelligence understanding of that individual learner to categorize them in some way? I think not. I think that would be problematic. So I think one of the biggest things that we'll need to grapple with is, what is that relationship between the artificial intelligence and the human intelligence within educational settings? What do we want the AI to do to help us, but where do we say no? I worry quite a lot about the kinds of technology that comes at young people in particular, that encourages them to offload some of that strenuous mental effort that they need to learn to do. I worry that there's a risk that our AI can dumb people down, and we need to guard against that. What we need to do is to use the AI to make us smarter, not to dumb us down. So just going through that way of thinking about intelligence, I think there are 7 elements. They're not discrete, it's not separate intelligences, it's just elements of a very complex, connected whole. And I think the meta-intelligence is the most important thing. That really sets us aside from AI, and it can make us effective in the world. There are 3 very interesting books written by the same author about the world. He's a philosopher, Noah Yuval Harari. And in his last book, which is called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, he concludes that actually the most important thing for humans to do is to know themselves. Because he says, the AI is going to know you, so you better know yourself better than the AI. And I don't see it quite like that, but I do think understanding ourselves is fundamentally important. So that real valuable skill is going to be that accurate perceived self-efficacy, that ability to go on learning and developing. And AI can help us. If we get it right, we can use all this data we can collect to help us analyze using what we understand about human learning, help us unlock the box inside our heads and our bodies as well, so that we can understand how we're learning, how we're progressing, how our students are learning, and how they're progressing. We can build this intelligence infrastructure. As Mathilde said earlier, I wrote this book year before last. It tells you more about the evidence behind that idea of that interconnected intelligence. I'm now writing the follow-up book, but it's not ready yet. And just to summarize, I think there are implications for artificial intelligence for educators. There's no question about it. But it's important to remember that AI is smart in very particular ways. We are much smarter. That rich variety of human intelligence is much, much smarter than any AI. An AI that can drive a car can't play chess. An AI that can diagnose cancer can't drive a car. AI is very clever at very specific things. We can do a whole range of different things, and we can learn to understand ourselves. So we need to think about those 3 types of implication for education. We need to think how we can use the AI that's available now to augment our human intelligence as educators. We need to think about how we help educators to work with technology developers to build that vision of the intelligence infrastructure in a way that's appropriate for education. We need to think about the ethical implications about helping people understand AI, and we need to think about how we change the way we teach, the way we train, in order to really help people develop that full repertoire of their intelligence. And I really believe that partnership is the way forward. It's the only way that we'll really get the right kind of AI that could leverage our human intelligence in very important ways. I understand that Vladimir Putin has said that the country that aces AI will be the leading country in the world. I have to disagree. I think the country that aces human intelligence will be the leading country in the world. We need to make the AI make us smarter, not dumb us down. And I'll say thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure being here, and I hope that's been helpful and interesting for you. Thank you. Thank you,
Rosemary
Mathilde.
Luckin. Oh my God. That was absolutely mind-blowing for me. I felt very afraid to start with. AI is making me scared, because I cannot grasp it. So
Well,
your
it's
finish here
invisible,
is
isn't it?
fantastic.
Yeah,
We need to trust the humans. Oh my God, I feel
do.
so much calmer.
good.
How about you? Do you feel calm? No, you never feel calm. You're always a bit stressed because you're wondering what your students are doing now when they
Yes.
have another teacher teaching them.
Thank
That's
you,
a good thing.
Mathilde.
No, please stay.
oh,
Can I
okay.
ask you a question?
Yes, of
Is
course
that
you
okay?
can. Yes.
I've written down several questions. One of my first one is, you spoke about, to understand what AI is and what it can and can't do. What is like, do you have a tip, or do you have something to do when they get home, they meet their
Yes.
colleagues and they start to discuss, we had this lecture about AI, what should they do to just come closer to the
Yeah,
subject?
and that's such a good question, and that is the book I'm writing at the moment. It's very basic with a teacher,
Yes.
and it will be free. How can I understand AI? There are quite a few free resources out there. Some of them are much better than others, and some of them are more accessible than others. But what I really think is play with AI, probe it. Think about, you've got AI on your phone. As you're using it to navigate, or you're using Alexa or Siri or whatever you use, think about, what is happening here? I'm speaking to this device. What's it doing? What's it capable of doing? Try and catch it out. Try and test it. Try and probe it. Don't be afraid of it. And the other thing I'd say is try and have conversations with some of the AI companies. If you can find local companies, there are a lot of small companies springing up everywhere who are trying to leverage AI. Have conversations with them, offer to help them if they're interested in applications in education. But I think going out there and playing and trying to read, there's some basic explanation of AI in that book, but the next one is very much more a very practical kind of,
Very good.
what do I do now as a teacher?
Good.
Kind of book, because I think that is really important, and we do need to focus on it.
Yeah.
There are free resources. The Finnish 1% program is quite good, because that's about educating the 1% of the population to understand AI, and then they educate another 1% and another 1%. If that was the UK, we would have said, let's educate 87% of the population, and just failed abysmally. I think 1% is a great
It's
idea.
good, yeah.
Yeah, so there are some good free resources out there, but explore them. And if an AI company, particularly if you're going to bet, and there are some companies who use AI at bet, don't let them fob you off. If you don't understand what they're saying their system does, don't let them get away with it, because there's a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of stuff that says it's AI that isn't AI. What's it actually doing? What's intelligent about this? What difference is it going to make to my students? But, be confident. You know way more about teaching and learning than any of the companies you'll meet at bet.
Wonderful. Good advice. And another question. In the beginning of your lecture, you were talking about we have to change the educational system because of AI. So if that's what they should do when they go home, play and learn more and read your book, of course. So what do we need to do about the educational system?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I've been working with the Education Select Committee here. And that's the way our parliamentary system works, is that you have these select committees that have inquiries, politicians from all parties work together, and then produce a report that the government has to respond to. Our report should be published. We had this thing called an election back in December, and that interrupted everything, so we're now getting back on track.
Yep.
So I've been working with them on a report that's about the Fourth Industrial Revolution and thinking about the implications for education. And all over the world, different education departments, ministries are grappling with this, some more actively than others. And so, for teachers in individual schools, there's a limit to what you can do because you have to work within your system. Now, I think the Swedish system is more open, so there's more opportunity. But I think thinking about those meta-intelligences, thinking about helping students understand themselves is fundamentally important. And that kind of thing is something we can all do much more of all of the time.
Because that's what I want to wrap it up with. Because I think there is a question that you asked on stage. It was, what is knowledge?
Yes.
I guess it's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
But in times like these, maybe that's the core thing we need to ask ourselves every day.
I agree.
What is
and it's
knowledge
used,
today?
the word knowledge is misused so much. It's in the book actually, about 5 years ago, I think it was, I was walking along Euston Road in North London. I walked past the British Library, and there was a sign saying, "Come in, knowledge freely available here." And I thought, that's awful. That's not knowledge, that's information. It takes effort to construct knowledge, to understand the world. And I worry that people talk about information as knowledge when it's not. There's all the time we're learning new things. We're learning new things about the world, about ourselves. There are a few things that are absolutely certain. So we need to understand where knowledge comes from, what it really is. We need to understand evidence and care about evidence, care about whether things are true, whether we should believe them or not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very easy for people's understanding, their beliefs to be changed without them even realizing they've been changed. We need to really understand ourselves and understand our relationship to knowledge to make sure that we make good decisions about what we believe and what we don't believe. So
Fantastic.
it's really important.
It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you.
Thank you. Thank
Now
you very
you
much.
can exit the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.